One reaction with Levy, and welcome to the second episode of the Up Next Network podcast, along with Oliver Schaack. I am Matthew Levy. Another beautiful Monday. Now we're on opposite time zones today. I'm on the East Coast, so it's mid-afternoon. Oliver is at lunch. It's around 12:30 in the Pacific. So, Oliver, how you doing today? You ready to rumble?
Monday fun day. I'm ready to roll. Start the week off good on the West Coast, best coast. I got so many rhymes.
I
But
love
yeah,
it.
I'm
I
ready to
love
go.
it. Love the energy.
I'm
Love
ready
the
to go.
energy. All right, let's get into this. Jonathan Taylor. Let's start there. That's been interesting to see.
Yeah.
This is an interesting situation. I know we both have different takes on it, but let's start with just talking this through.
Yeah.
What is Jim Irsay doing?
Yeah, he went bold. He went real bold when he came out and said absolutely not. Like if you're trying to get on Jonathan Taylor's good side, you didn't do that. There's no way, right? I mean, look at the Saquon situation. The one thing I'll give the ownership of the Giants credit for, they handled that very well. They never came out and said, "Oh, Saquon's in the wrong," or "No way, we're trading him." No way, this and that. They really wanted him to be a part of the team. And Jim Irsay, with the owner of the Colts, I think it was a complete wrong approach, right? Because you're basically telling Taylor, "You're an idiot for wanting to get traded. You're an idiot for wanting to request a trade."
It doesn't make any sense, right? I know we've given a lot of power to the players, right? And I know, like in the NBA, right, we're giving just so much power to the players in certain situations. But this feels like, hey, this is an overreaction to me. This is saying you got to treat your player with some respect. Putting him on the rumor that came out about putting him on the injured list because of
That
a
was
back
bad.
injury. Are
That
you
was
kidding
bad.
me?
That was horrible.
You can't treat people like that. This guy is a human being. And to
Yeah,
treat, just because everyone's off on the running back market, I get it. But to treat someone like that, I thought that was uncalled for. It may be the right move to not pay him. And I could agree with that, right? You're developing a quarterback. You don't want to commit all this money to a star running back. I get it. And he doesn't catch the ball as much. But to handle the situation like this is just not smart. It's just not.
I could not agree with you more. And that's the other thing. The Colts, it's not like they're in a situation where they're like, okay, whatever, we don't need you. We're a playoff team anyway. You may not win 4 games with him, let alone without him. God knows how many games you're going to win without him. So I don't think Jim Irsay handled it well at all, because AR-15, like, he's going to have struggles, because the big thing with him is his accuracy, and it's going to lead to a lot of turnovers most likely. So I don't understand why you would really, he went at Jonathan Taylor's throat. Like, that's what he did. I don't think it's the right way to approach it. You're a team in a major rebuild. I mean, it's what, them and the Cardinals probably in the biggest rebuilds as of right now.
Yep.
That bearing that, Kyler Murray doesn't return, that we don't know what's going on there. But those are the two teams that are in a big rebuild. Can you imagine if the Arizona Cardinals came out and said, if Kyler requested a trade and their owner said, no shot, you're not getting what you want, just like that? You know what I mean?
Stupid. It's just how you do business. That's the issue. You could do business in certain ways. You don't have to pay him. You don't have to trade him. You might just want to do exactly what the Giants did in a way, in which you want to keep the guy for 2 more years, develop under Anthony Richardson, and when his time's up, his time's up. I get that method of thinking. That makes sense. That's smart. But to handle it like this so publicly is not smart. It just doesn't work. Whenever there's more noise, right, Oliver, it just doesn't turn out well. It just doesn't.
And that's the thing with the Giants. They didn't make noise. Like, they could have made a lot of noise with Saquon. They kept it very professional. I mean, I didn't see anything where the ownership...
No leaks.
Nothing at all. They signed Saquon Barkley. They didn't make a huge deal out of it. They just kept going. So I like how the Giants handled it. Jim Irsay, a lot of problems with how he's handled it. And it's just going to lead to more problems if he continues to do this.
This is the funniest thing too, right? Let's look at all of sports. What owner that is so outspoken? Let's look at it. Steve Ballmer, Dave Tepper, Jerry Jones.
Yeah, I was going to say Jerry Jones.
When has it ever worked? It's never worked.
And the thing, like you mentioned, Jerry Jones, unless you have his bank account, it doesn't work. Like, that's he's the owner of the America's team, like the biggest sports franchise in the country. Like, if the Cowboys go 4-12, they're going to make as much money as they go 17-0. You can't come out and say that. You just can't. Jonathan Taylor, by the way, has Taylor ever done anything wrong? Like, off the field, he has been a good person, never been a locker room problem, delivers as far as production. So I don't understand this approach at all from Irsay. It makes no sense.
And it feels like, if you look at what the Colts have been doing, they used to be called the smart organization. They drafted Quentin Nelson at number 6 after trading down. They had Andrew Luck at one point. And then once Andrew Luck left and they brought in Phillip Rivers, he was going to fix some things. each year after year, their production has gone down.
Been
While
bad.
Jim Irsay's comments have gone up.
Yeah.
It is.
It's just, and this is an organization in the 2000s. Like, they were the only organization that could touch the Patriots during like that 2000 stretch.
Yep.
They were the only, there was no one else in the AFC that could touch them. When they had Peyton Manning, Marvin Harrison, Reggie Wayne, that Edgerrin James, like when they had those guys, like they were the only team that could come near them. So I don't understand, like, obviously not the same roster. You're not going to be very good regardless, even if you keep Taylor, obviously. I'm not saying, they're going to contend, but it just doesn't make sense. You're not in a situation to open your mouth like that. I don't care if you're an owner. You have duties to be a respectable guy if you want to have any respect from your players. Jim Irsay royally screwed this up.
And he did. And on one hand, you can say that is the right move to not pay him, and I agree with that. But to handle like this, not so good. All right, let's move on. I want to go to you, Oliver, about the Green Bay Packers and the New York Jets, because this, to me, is more interesting. Aaron Rodgers took a $35 million pay cut, something he did not do in Green Bay. He was not this committed to a team in Green Bay. He was not. Thoughts as a Green Bay fan? Are you just pissed at him?
I mean, here's the thing. No, I understand. I understand why he didn't do this with Green Bay. Because what's the one thing they never invested in his, 16 years in Green Bay? What?
Receivers?
They never developed, like in the early rounds, they never, ever, they just did not see eye to eye with Rodgers his entire time. Like even the year they drafted Jordan Love. I mean, if that, to me, that's when I knew at some point Rodgers is just he's going to throw in the towel. You know what I mean? And then Devontae left and he tried to keep it going and they were one away from making the playoffs last year. And then Detroit happened, but I kind of agreed with Rodgers. You weren't investing in what he's great at, which is making receivers great. And you weren't doing that. And eventually he was going to get frustrated. And you look at the Jets, they have a young receiving core. They invested in their offense. Breece Hall's coming back. So it's more his type of team and organization. I totally get it. I wish Green Bay did the same. That being said, they invested a lot around him. On the defense. The defense is pretty solid. We have some great names. I like the defense going into this year, but it just eventually got to a point where him and Brian Gutekunst, the GM of the Packers, they were just butting heads, and eventually you can't make that up. So I get why it was time to let go of him this past offseason. It sucks because the one nice thing, it does show he wants to win. It does show he wants to make, you know what I mean? To take a $35 million pay cut, that's pretty big.
It's something he would have never done in Green Bay, and it's a complete pivot. It's a complete pivot in just everything he believes. It feels like, which is interesting, he was a child in Green Bay with just all the rules on him, the punishment, hey, we're going to draft defense. And now he feels like an adult. He's moving to the big city in New York, and now he's getting the weapons. He's getting the fun stuff, and he feels like he has more responsibility. It feels like it's his team, and you could say that about Green Bay. But it was more, the Packers had a brand, and they were going to draft for the good of the team.
Yeah.
The Jets, whether it works or not, it feels like, hey, this is your team. We're going to build around you. We're going to bring in a Dalvin Cook if you want him, an Alan Lazard, a Randall Cobb. We're going to bring in your guys. This is your team, Nathaniel Hackett. This is your team. So I think it's a complete switch. I think Rodgers is responding positively towards it in what could be, and I don't know how you feel about the Jets, but a couple months ago, I was not high on them. I didn't think they had an offensive line, and I didn't love what they were doing. It feels like now, with this switch from Aaron Rodgers being all in, having this much talent, with the injury to Jalen Ramsey, with the Bills not addressing what they were bad at last year, there is a world where the Jets can win this division. I don't think it's that far-fetched.
No, it's absolutely not. And also, you got to look at the trends in the modern-day game. You need an offense where you can air it out. You can blame Mahomes and the Chiefs. You can blame whoever you want, but that's just how it is. It's kind of like how the three-pointer in the NBA over the past 10 years has become like a staple, whereas it wasn't so much in like the early 2000s. Like, you need to be able to throw the ball. You need to be able to fling it. And if you look at the division in the AFC East, Tua doesn't, throw it downfield a lot, but he still has Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. So it's a heavy pass offense. You look at the Bills, Stephon Diggs, Dawson Knox, Gabe Davis. They just drafted Dalton Kincaid. They're dangerous in the passing game as well. So if you're going to compete in this division, you need to be able to be a threat in the passing game. That's why I like what they've done. You have Garrett Wilson, who was incredible last year, Offensive Rookie of the Year. getting guys like Randall Cobb, a veteran guy that Rodgers is comfortable with, Alan Lazard, another veteran guy he's comfortable with. I think it makes a lot of sense what the Jets have been doing. And yeah, you're right. I could see a world where the Jets make the playoffs. I'm not going to say they're going to win 12 games. It's going to be a tough division. And you might be bounced into the wild card because if Buffalo keeps doing what they've been doing, or Miami last year had a good year, and if Tua is healthy, maybe they have an even better year. So I think those are three teams that are playoff contenders. And yeah, absolutely. The Jets are going to be a formidable team. I like their defense a lot, obviously. They have one of the best cornerback duos in the league. So I definitely see a world where the Jets could be a very serious playoff contender and could win the AFC East. Absolutely.
They have the ability to throw the football down the field, and they have the ability, probably the best in the AFC, to stop the football from going down the field.
Yeah, great defense.
Excellent defense, especially in that secondary. They got Chuck Clark there from the Ravens last year. Excellent player, excellent veteran that they got. So yeah. I think I really think this is, if Aaron Rodgers is Aaron Rodgers, not like last year's Aaron Rodgers, they're going to be good.
And even, sorry, not to interrupt you, but even up front, like Quinn Williams is fantastic. And they just signed him for an extension in the offseason. He's one of the best defensive tackles in the game. Jermaine Johnson, the second-year guy out of Florida State, they got in the late first round. I don't know how they got him that late, by the way. I'm super high on Jermaine Johnson, but he was great last year. He's going to be even better. Like, they have guys in every part of the defense that can put pressure on the quarterback. And if you look at the two teams, like Miami, if Tua is pressured, he's not as good. Even Josh Allen, like, he's great at escaping the pressure, but if you can get to him, it's pretty hard for Buffalo to make up for that because the run game isn't great, right?
Yeah, they're so reliant on them. He's so reliant on Josh Allen. It feels like Aaron Rodgers, if the offensive line and Breece Hall comes back, they don't need to be reliant as much as a Josh Allen for the Buffalo Bills.
And that's underrated, by the way, that Breece Hall is coming back because he's very good. And it was unfortunate that he tore his ACL last year. But I mean, if he can make a big leap, and if they get a Dalvin Cook, that would be huge. If they can get someone if they sign him to a 1 year, because they have been linked to getting Dalvin Cook in recent days.
He was just there.
So that'd be a good duo. Him and Dalvin and Breece Carter. I think that would be a very, very good backfield.
But the way they structured this schedule for them, they gave them a lot of advantageous rest opportunities, and the big games are at home. Kansas City at home.
Yeah.
Dallas. I mean, it feels favorable to me, and it feels like the NFL wants Aaron Rodgers back in the playoffs. And if he's committed and they can figure out the offensive line, that's the only thing. Can they figure it out? Because that roster is absolutely loaded.
So good. And like, if Mekhi Becton's healthy, like if he can finally get a healthy season out of him, that's like the biggest man on the planet. Mm-hmm. And if he's playing, my God, he's huge. If he's whether he's a left tackle, right tackle, whatever, they have some good guys on the interior, so if they can bring him back as well, that's huge. And yeah, if the offensive line's good and they can establish a running game and then let Aaron Rodgers do his thing, that's a very dangerous Jets offense.
All right, let's move on. Joe Burrow, we all know about his injury, and they're saying several weeks, up to 6 weeks, maybe more. Let's talk about the hypothetical scenarios here, because this is just like the AFC East, the AFC North is tough. I think 4 really good teams. So if Joe Burrow, right, let's say week 1, they go to Cleveland, and then they play at home versus the Ravens in week 2. You made this point, Oliver. Do you think if Joe Burrow is close to 100% or just a little bit below 100% in week 1, do you risk it because of the division and how hard it is? Or do you wait for week 2 for the big one at home between the Baltimore Ravens and the Bengals?
It's also just so tough because a calf injury can lead to so much worse. It's kind of like how if you mess up your hamstring, that can lead to so much worse. Like, completely different sport, but excuse me, in 2019 with KD, when he had a calf injury, and then in the finals, he tore his Achilles because he was trying to push it, and it eventually led to a torn Achilles. That was brutal. That was hard to watch. I don't know if you remember the video footage of it when you just saw his calf completely. Oh my God, it was horrible. And I would never want that to happen to Burrow because that was disastrous. That being said, if it truly is just a calf strain and it doesn't look like it could lead to other injuries, like you said, week 1 against the Browns, Deshaun Watson's going to be back. It's going to be his first full season since he was suspended, and he's a formidable quarterback when he's right. So that's not, even with Burrow, that's not a guarantee. That's a good Cleveland roster, I believe, and that could be a tough game week 1.
And he would have to face, sorry to interrupt, he would have to face Myles Garrett with a new left tackle, right? Yes. First week right away, we're getting Myles Garrett.
Right. Absolutely.
So that's a little.
It's not a given. It really is not a given. And then week 2, Baltimore. that to me, to win the division, I think even though all 4 teams are great, I think Baltimore and Cincinnati are the 2 that everyone says they're going to be at the top, right? Those are the 2, I think, best rosters, 2 best quarterbacks. 2 best quarterbacks in the division, great head coaches, great coaching staffs. So if he's good to go, like if he's 95%, I think you send him out there, because it's also Joe Burrow. He's tough. Like if his 90% is most quarterbacks 100%, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? And he's also a smart guy. If he really thinks he's not ready to go, he doesn't come off as a guy, at least in my opinion, that's going to force something when nothing's there. He's a smart guy, and I hope it doesn't come to that. But I think if he feels he's ready to go, and the medical staff and the training staff and everyone that works with the Bengals supports him, and the doctors that he sees, whoever it might be, says, yeah, it's not a bad idea for him to play 100%, because that's 2 division games off the bat, which is kind of crazy.
It's such a tough start.
It's brutal. I mean, it's a tough situation. If I was Zach Taylor, it's not a good place to be in, because you don't want to risk. That's your guy, obviously. He was in talks with her contract extension. How does this affect that? Right? If it does lead to more stuff, hopefully, I think they should, obviously, there's no one who says they shouldn't extend Burrow, but does this get pushed off to later in the season? And does that lead to frustration and locker room issues? It's tough. I think if he feels good and he's confident, and the training staff and medical staff are confident he can play without putting himself and the team at risk, he should be out there week 1.
I agree. All right, let's move on. MLB trade deadline coming up, right? It is tomorrow, August 1st. But there's already been some moves. Texas Rangers, they're going all in. And Oliver, I don't know how you feel about this, but they have literally pushed in all the chips. Get Max Scherzer, Jordan Montgomery. Are you a fan of these moves or not?
I'm a fan. I am a fan of these moves, because the offense is there. That was never in question. They could compete with any offense in the big leagues when it comes to October, when it comes to the postseason. And their starting pitching has been great this year. Nathan Eovaldi, Andrew Heaney, John Gray, they've been fantastic with no DeGrom, by the way. They have no DeGrom. And if he was in and if he was healthy, I mean, they would be one of those 2 or 3 teams where you're like, they could win the World Series. But they definitely needed another frontline guy, right? Because as good as John Gray and Andrew Heaney have been, they're not guys when you go into the postseason saying, oh, we can rely on them. Because up until this point, John Gray, up until this point in his career, has not been a formidable starter in Colorado, right? Andrew Heaney's been up and down his entire career, never been like a consistent guy, consistent all-star guy. So, I mean, Eovaldi's definitely the best pitcher of the 3. So to bring in Max Scherzer, he's obviously, I don't think he is what he used to be stuff-wise. One of the things I think the pitch clock has affected his entire routine. I think because he's older, it's hard for him to repeat his mechanics, for him to be as sharp as consistently. But it's Max Scherzer in the postseason. You know what I mean? Like, that's a guy you want to give the ball to game 1 or game 2. Probably game 1, right? I think they'd lean Scherzer game 1. That being said, also, they didn't give up too much. People were acting like they gave up 1 prospect, who, by the way, is Ronald Acuña's brother. I found that out today. Luis Angel Acuña. They gave up him, and then I believe the Rangers are paying like $22 million of his player option, which is 43 in total. So it's not as if they gave up a whole ton. They didn't take a huge risk with what they gave up. I mean, if Acuña's brother turns out to be like Acuña, then we can come back to that combo, but not many people are going to be Acuña. So I feel confident saying that. I like what they did. And I think if this is the year to do it, if you're the Rangers, go all in. The Astros are not as strong as they used to be. They got to be a team that makes a move. They have very limited time, but they got to be a team that makes a move. And yeah, I think Texas did all the right things. I like their chances going into the postseason, and I don't see why they couldn't. I mean, they're a team that could win the American League.
I love it. He's all in. And I tend to agree, Oliver, in the fact that they added something that they didn't have, and that's big game experience. Max Scherzer's been there and done that. And Jacob deGrom was supposed to be the alpha of this rotation this year, and they didn't get that. And they held up strong, right? They've been excellent offensively, as you said. But this is now you're bringing in 2 pitchers that have been in big games. Jordan Montgomery, he was a Yankee. He's been in big games. Max Scherzer.
I agree. No, 100%.
No, and it's interesting because now, in order to compete with Houston, I think the biggest thing is experience. Because when it gets down to the playoffs, and you hate this with the Golden States of the world, with the Belichick teams, with the Saban teams, these teams, when the big game comes up, they're ready. They're more prepared. Now you bring in a guy like Max Scherzer, and he knows how to win. And that's important because this team needs to learn how to win.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, you look at the Astros, this is not one of their better rosters. They lost a lot. Like, Correa's no longer there. right? They don't have Verlander this year anymore, although they've been linked to trying to make a last second push.
We'll get into that next. We'll get into that next.
I don't know how 100% that is, but this is the most even a team has been with the Astros in the past 6 years. They made 5 or 6 straight ALCSs, defending World Series champs. This is the year to go for it, because even if they do get Verlander back, now that you have Scherzer, I mean, he's not, the ace, like he's not the best pitcher in the league this year. Obviously, he's had his struggles in New York, but he's still Max Scherzer. Like, I feel good about putting him out on the bump game 1 of an ALDS or a wild card, right? I mean, who wouldn't? And they also, I think the most underrated thing about the Texas Rangers, Bruce Bochy came in year 1, and this is the result. Like, Bruce Bochy, this was a guy who was retired. He was the head manager, the Giants for that dynasty, 3 World Series in 5 years. He is so good in the big moments and making the right decisions. Because if you look at those teams, the Giants, they weren't powerhouse teams. They weren't like the Golden State Warriors with KD, Steph, and Clay. They weren't like a dominant powerhouse with big names all over the place. But he knew how to manage that team and get the most out of them. And I think he's going to do that with the Rangers. And I think they should be one of the heavy favorites to win the American League, especially with this move.
So it's interesting. Because right now the pennant favorites, the Rays are plus 310, Astros plus 400, Rangers plus 500, Orioles plus 650. Do you think today the Rangers are the favorite in the AL?
I would probably give the edge slightly to the Rays.
To the Rays. They've been under 500 for a month or two now.
Here's it. Yes, they have. I think it's really close. I think it's them, the Orioles, and the Rangers. To me, those are the 3 best.
Wow, he's not even including the Astros. I think it's the Astros. Until someone beats them, they still have those guys there, and they have a very good rotation, excellent bullpen. How is the Astros not in that conversation?
You can put the Astros into. I'm not saying the Astros aren't going to be good. I just think if there's a year where, this is the best. You look at all 3 of these teams. The Astros are obviously, they've been to 6 ALCSs, but the Orioles look better than they ever have. I think the Rays are a team that you never want to play them in the postseason. I don't care what year. They are always a dangerous team. And the Texas Rangers, they just showed all right, we're here. Let's go. I think the Rangers by far, I think they're the best offense. I think that's without question when you look at the other teams. And if they don't get Verlander, then yeah, I would say the Rangers, I would give the slight advantage to. If they get Verlander, it's different. Right. If they get a frontline guy, if the Astros if they get a frontline guy, then I would say the Astros are probably, just because they're the Houston Astros. You know what I mean? They know how to win. They know how to win the game 5s on the road and the game 6s and game 7s. They've done it before, but it's also a different team than it was a few years ago. It's not like they were the dominant team on paper in the stat book. They're the team that they had everything. And I think they have a few more holes this year. So I would say it's not a given that they're going to win the American League, even though they still have Framber Valdez, who's been great. They still have a solid bullpen, but look at the Texas Rangers. Solid rotation, solid bullpen. Aroldis Chapman's been lights out since they got him, right? They have.
You're kidding me. Terrible.
Sorry.
I hate that.
Look at the Tampa Bay Rays. I mean, Glasnow's back and he looks great. That rotation's formidable, right? They have a solid bullpen. So, I mean, they
lost a lot. They lost a lot.
They did. They definitely lost a bit, but I just think it's not. I can't go out there and say the Houston Astros are the favorite or the dominant favorite. It's such a coin flip. So it's such a coin flip in the American League. By the way, the American League is just loaded. I mean, they are loaded. So it's just, I can't say they're going to be the definite favorite to win the AL, because there's just so many teams that are playing so well and have a lot of momentum going into the postseason. And the Rangers, Rangers, Rays, and Orioles, are the 3 teams that I think the Astros should be scared of.
All right. You heard it here. It's a coin flip. It's loaded in the AL, but the Rangers have put themselves on the map. All right, let's end it off here. Let's fire a couple headlines as we head towards the trade deadline tomorrow.
Yep.
Dodgers. Do they get Justin Verlander?
I hope so. I don't think the Dodgers right now, they have a lot of questions with their starting rotation. I mean, Julio's not been great this year. He's been injured. They're 2 young guys, Michael Grove and Bobby Miller. I mean, Bobby Miller, first 4 starts, looked lights out, and since then, not much. Michael Grove struggled all year. The last start against the Rays, you want to hear something crazy? He gave up 8 runs and struck out 10 hitters. How is that even possible? That doesn't make sense. So he has good stuff, but you give up 8 runs. That just doesn't happen. So,
except if you're Luis Severino. Continue.
That's fair. But I don't think the Dodgers are going to, they're definitely not the NL favorite, regardless if they get Verlander. I think the Braves are regardless the favorite out of the NL. And to me, this roster, it's not good enough to make the World Series. It's just bottom line. And it's the worst the starting rotation has looked the entire time that they've been one of the prominent teams in the National League since 2013. The bullpen has issues. I think there's not enough reliable guys out of the bullpen. So I think the Dodgers, if they want to really make a push, they got to get a guy like him. Will they? Andrew Friedman's not exactly a risk taker, or not a risk taker, but he doesn't get a lot of big guys. Like since the Turner Scherzer deal with the Nationals a few years back, he hasn't really done much. Like he hasn't. Like
just getting Trey Turner and Max Scherzer is just nothing. It's just
come on. Yeah. Since then, I mean, look at the past offseason. Miguel Rojas was the biggest guy that they got. In an offseason, by the way, where the Dodgers lost Trey Turner, Cody Bellinger, and Justin Turner. And the biggest thing that he got back was Miguel Rojas. That's not enough to compete for a World Series with the teams that are in the AL and the Atlanta Braves. So if he wants to make this push, he's got to make a big splash. And Verlander's the guy to get if you want to make a big splash. So if they want to be a World Series contender, they got to get him.
Interesting. All right. I agree. I think they need him as well. All right, Yankees, because as a Yankee fan, I'm so confused in so many different ways. I think everyone should be out. I think they should sell, especially their bullpen, which is so much value compared to these other teams. Sell the bullpen pieces, sell some of them, whether it's a Clay Holmes or a Michael King. Restructure this roster. They're not winning. We just talked about the loaded teams of the Rangers and the Astros. And why? What are they doing?
Dude, I am very curious about the Yankees because it's not as if they're selling guys and people are like, oh my God, what are you doing? Or they're buying guys. It's like, why would you do that? They're not doing anything. They literally have not done anything. And there's less than 24 hours until the deadline comes and goes. And they're not I don't think this team right now is good enough to, even if they make that wild card, because the team's ahead of them. Toronto Blue Jays.
They're not getting in.
That's the other thing. They may not even get it.
They're not getting in. And they're going to lose Bader in free agency, which is awful. They're so far away, and they've gotten worse, and they're just relying on this one-star player, and it's just an awful situation. Veteran players getting older. I agree. And by the way, the numbers when Judge is out of the lineup, can you imagine he misses like a 5-game stretch in September? It literally, they're one of the worst teams in the league when Aaron Judge is not playing over the past 3-4 years. They are really bad. And I don't know. I mean, Gleyber Torres got linked to the Marlins. I agree with you. I think the Yankees are in a position to sell at this point. They didn't do anything beforehand. The Jays just got Jordan Hicks, which I think was a good move. But I think the Yankees are not. Yeah, they need to sell. This is not a good enough team to make a World Series championship. And one of the guys they would have gotten, Cody Bellinger, is now staying in Chicago. They have the best. I think they have a positive run differential, but they've won 10 of 12. Chicago Cubs. They're staying put. Do you agree or disagree?
I think it's interesting because I think they're trying to make a push, and yes, their division isn't the Reds aren't going to run away with it. I don't think the Brewers aren't going to run away with it. I think the Cubs aren't going to I don't think they're going to win their division. I think their way in is through the wild card, and I believe they're 3.5 back of that. But is this team good enough to make that difference up? Are we relying on them winning 10 of 12? Once in August and just continuing to be very good over that long of a stretch? I don't know if that can happen, and it's interesting because if they keep Bellinger, they got to assume he's going to walk. I don't see him re-signing with the Cubs because you got to realize for them also, they got a guy in their farm system, Pete Crow Armstrong, who's a center fielder and for people who don't know who he is a monster. It's like Brandon Nimmo, Cody Bellinger combined. He's that. I think he can be that good. Plus speed, plus arm, plus everything. And I don't understand it with the Cubs. I think Jameson Taillon, who they signed in the offseason, his ERA is inflated. I think at one point. I mean, it's just unbelievable. And he had a great season before. It's just, I don't know. I would have sold. I've said this before. I would sell if I was the Cubs. You could get a lot back. You could build up your farm system even more, but more power to them. I think, go for it. I guess. I don't think they're going to make the playoffs, but more power to them.
No. I think it actually kind of makes sense just because of their analytical numbers. And this feels like this run was coming for a while because they've been so good, there's some crazy stats out there that they should be better with the run differential and that type of stuff.
That's true.
They got a 1-2 punch. Stroman leading the way there. And with pitching. They got a hitting lineup that's been pretty good, getting better. Bellinger's been great for them. They've got guys. It feels like this is a big market team that is sick and tired of losing. That feels like, hey, if we can get, unlike the AL, the NL Central right now is wide open. And why not? They've won 10 to 12. I like the move. I like believing your guys. This is the opposite of what the Orioles did last year. I kind of like the move. I'm going to disagree with you that. I like what they're doing. I like staying put here if you're Chicago.
No, I will say though, like I don't think they're like idiots for buying. I think they would be better off in years coming if they were sellers, sure. But if you want to keep Marcus Stroman, this is the way to do it. I mean, he's a guy who any roster he's on, he would be a buyer if he was 30 games under 500. Like that's the type of guy Marcus Stroman is. You know what I mean? He's a super competitive guy. I would say the ace of your staff. Justin Steele's been great, but I think, push comes to shove, he's getting the ball game one in any series. So you're right. I mean, there is some positives to buying, and I hope they shut me up and make the playoffs and go on a deep run. Dansby Swanson, he's missed a little bit of time with injuries, but if he can come back and be the guy that they signed him to in the offseason, maybe the Cubs can make a push. And you're right, the run differential is incredible. So I would still probably sell if I was them, but you know what? They could sneak in. They definitely could sneak in.
They definitely can. All right. We are 24 hours away from the MLB trade deadline. Lots of stuff will come out. We'll get all that stuff on Up Next Network coming out today, tomorrow, whenever the news comes. NFL right around the corner. Great episode number 2, Oliver.
Absolutely.
Have a good one. Yeah, it was great.
Thanks for having me on.
Of course. And we'll do it again soon. So that's it for the Up Next Network here on July 31st.